The sun blazed over the crystalline waters of Key West, Florida, where Vivian and her husband Ryan had chosen to spend the first blissful days of their honeymoon. Palm fronds swayed gently in the warm ocean breeze, casting playful shadows across the soft sand. Vivian's heart had never felt lighter, and Ryan seemed perfect, attentive, affectionate, radiating a warmth that made her chest flutter. As they walked along the shoreline, their bare feet sinking into the golden sand, he leaned close and whispered, "We're exactly where we're meant to be, babe." Vivian smiled, letting his words wrap around her like a comforting blanket. She didn't notice the flicker of unease in his bright eyes, the subtle tension he tried so hard to hide. Quick glances over his shoulder, the slight fidgeting of his fingers, the occasional nervous swallow, all tiny cracks she, blinded by love, failed to see. That evening, they dined at a secluded ocean view resort. The restaurant's large windows framed a horizon painted in fiery oranges and deep purples, waves reflecting the sunset like molten gold. Yet Vivian noticed Ryan checking his phone more often than usual, his brow furrowing in fleeting moments of distraction. "Everything okay?" she asked lightly, trying to mask the worry creeping into her voice. Ryan flashed a nervous smile and tucked the phone into his pocket. "Yeah, just work stuff. Don't worry about it." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him, twisting Vivian's stomach with confusion. She forced herself to focus on the gentle surf, the glimmering candlelight, the feeling of his hand brushing hers. Even in that perfect setting, the faintest shadow had begun to fall. Later, under the pale glow of the moon, Vivian sat alone on the terrace with a glass of white wine. The salty breeze tangled her hair and cooled her sun-warmed skin. Ryan had stepped out, claiming he needed to handle something at the hotel. She didn't even notice how quickly he left. Love has a way of blinding you. Unbeknownst to her, another woman was making her way to the same hotel. Mia. She wasn't there for a fleeting dalliance. She had come to stake her claim on a part of Ryan that Vivian had believed was hers alone. Vivian, blissfully unaware, was caught in a dangerous web, her honeymoon slowly turning into a silent battlefield. The next morning, the sun rose over Key West in a brilliant cascade of pinks and golds, painting the town in warmth. Ryan's words were still sweet, his smile still charming, but something about him had shifted. "Let's explore the island today," he suggested, his tone lighter than his eyes. Before Vivian could respond, his phone buzzed. He turned slightly, shielding the screen from her view. "Who is it?" she asked casually, though a spark of doubt had already ignited inside her. "Nothing important. Just work again," he said quickly, refusing to meet her eyes. The seed of mistrust planted itself firmly in her chest. As they strolled along the warm sand later that day, Ryan's phone buzzed again. He muttered something about needing to take the call and stepped away, disappearing behind a cluster of palms. Vivian stood rooted, the wind tugging at her sundress, hair whipping her face, watching him. For the first time, she noticed how distant he seemed, not just physically, but emotionally. A chill ran through her as the notion of doubt slowly unfurled. That evening, the golden sunset painted the sky in deep amber and rose. Vivian reached for Ryan's hand, hoping to bridge the invisible distance. "Ryan, what's going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling with quiet vulnerability. He forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" she pressed gently. "Work," he replied, a dry laugh escaping him. "You're on our honeymoon, and you can't stop thinking about work?" she asked softly, tension now lacing her tone. He hesitated, then abruptly stood. "I'll be right back. Need to take a call." He kissed her forehead quickly and walked away. Each step seemed to echo in her chest, each beat like something inside her breaking. Vivian tried to calm herself, focusing on the rhythmic crashing of waves, the scent of salt and hibiscus in the warm air, until movement caught her eye. A tall brunette approached along the shoreline, her posture confident, deliberate. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and a pang of unease shot through Vivian. The woman's presence was magnetic, leaving a lingering tension in the air long after she passed. When Vivian looked back at Ryan, still absorbed in his phone, an unsettling thought crystallized. Who was that woman? That night, Ryan was even more distant. He rushed through dinner, spoke little, and flinched every time his phone vibrated. Vivian's chest constricted. She thought of the brunette and couldn't ignore the connection she was beginning to sense. The next day, as they wandered through the charming streets of Charleston, South Carolina, Ryan excused himself again. "I'll grab us something to drink," he said before slipping down a sun-dappled side street. Vivian nodded absent-mindedly, then froze. Across the plaza, the same woman stood, her posture calm, her gaze intentional. A cold wave swept through Vivian, and suddenly the pieces began to fall into place. The late-night calls, the guarded distance, the restless smiles. That night, lying awake in their hotel room, Vivian stared at the ceiling. The wind tapped lightly against the window, carrying the faint hum of the city outside, but inside her, a storm was building. Ryan had been in the bathroom far too long, sending messages she could only imagine. Something snapped inside her, a quiet, determined clarity. She would not wait for the truth. She would seek it herself. When Ryan emerged, dressed and anxious, he mumbled something about a hotel issue. "Will it take long?" she asked softly. "Not at all, I'll be right back," he replied, avoiding her eyes as he grabbed his jacket. Vivian waited a moment, then slipped on her shoes and followed him into the dimly lit streets. Her pulse thundered in her ears, a mix of fear and rage propelling her forward. By the waterfront, near a small candlelit cafe, she saw him. Ryan. And he wasn't alone. Across the table sat the same brunette, the woman from the beach. Candlelight flickered across their faces as Ryan leaned in toward her, his voice low and intimate. Vivian froze, her heart hammering violently in her chest. The woman smiled, a cruel mirror of the warmth Vivian had believed was reserved solely for her. "Do you think she suspects?" the brunette asked, her tone playful. Ryan shook his head, forcing a laugh. "She has no idea. Vivian is too naive to imagine anything like this." The words hit Vivian like a frozen blade, shattering every dream she had ever built. Her chest constricted, her stomach twisted, and for a moment she imagined running forward, screaming, dismantling them both. But she didn't. She stayed in the shadows, rooted in a quiet fury, and from that fury, a plan began to form. If this was a game, she would learn the rules, and she would play. The pain of betrayal was nearly unbearable, but clarity tempered it. She would no longer be the woman who trusted without question. Tonight, confrontation would wait. She would wait, watch, and prepare. When they returned to the hotel, Ryan found Vivian exactly where he had left her, lying on the bed, eyes closed, serene as if nothing had happened. He slipped quietly into bed beside her, sighing with relief. In the darkness, Vivian opened her eyes just enough to watch him breathe. Her chest tightened, but she didn't stir him. She had changed. Confrontation would wait. Strategy would begin. Morning came over Key West in a soft, golden haze. The sun spilled warmth across the turquoise waves, and the scent of salt and blooming frangipani filled the air. Vivian greeted Ryan with her usual gentle smile, a mask of calm that concealed the storm of thought and emotion swirling inside her. He believed, foolishly, that he still had everything under control, that the facade he had so carefully built remained unbroken. But Vivian carried knowledge he couldn't imagine, and with it came a quiet power. The rules of their game had shifted, and she intended to play on her terms. Days passed with meticulous precision. Their home was immaculate, every detail prepared for the dinner she had planned. The dining room glowed under soft amber lamps, casting gentle shadows across a table arranged with exacting care. Plates gleamed, silverware caught the light just right, and the scent of roasted herbs, caramelized vegetables, and fresh bread drifted through the rooms, making the house feel lived in yet pristine. Guests began to arrive, friends and family exchanging warm greetings and polite chatter. Vivian moved among them with serene composure, adding finishing touches to place settings, smiling at people completely unaware of the tension pulsing behind her calm expression. Laughter and conversation masked the storm in her chest, but she held absolute control over her outward demeanor. No one guessed what was about to unfold. Ryan floated through the evening with practiced ease, the consummate charming husband. His jokes were effortless, his laughter smooth and familiar, his warmth calculated. He glanced at Vivian, expecting the familiar reassurance of her gaze, and she returned it with a measured, calm smile. Inside her, however, anger and grief had fused into something sharper, colder, and more controlled: power. She had chosen silence as her weapon. She knew this night would change everything, and though her heart still ached from betrayal, she was ready for the final strike. Then Mia entered, invited by Ryan himself, gliding through the doorway as if she belonged. Her eyes immediately found Ryan across the room, and a brief, conspiratorial look passed between them. Vivian observed from a distance, feeling a steady, terrible satisfaction. This was no blind fury. It was reclaiming control. Mia approached with the ease of someone confident in their place in the world. "Thank you for inviting me," she said, hand extended, voice warm and practiced. "Your home is beautiful." Vivian took her hand with a deliberate, cool smile. "The pleasure is mine," she replied evenly. "I hope you enjoy the evening." Polite words on the surface, but beneath them lay the meaning only Vivian intended, a subtle claim of control. No one else in the room noticed. Dinner progressed as expected. Polite conversation, the clinking of cutlery against porcelain, Ryan's easy humor keeping the table light. For everyone else, it was an ordinary evening of warmth and camaraderie. For Vivian, every second stretched taut, each moment a string vibrating with anticipation. She could feel the pivotal moment approaching with physical certainty, her palms damp with a mix of anxiety and resolve. When all the plates had been served and the chatter settled into a low hum, Vivian rose with deliberate calm. She moved to the edge of the table and tapped her glass with a spoon. The clear ring of crystal cut through the room like a blade, silencing all conversation. She turned slowly, letting her gaze sweep over the assembled faces, friends, family, and then lifted her voice, calm, steady, precise. "I'd like to make a toast," she said. Eyes turned to her, expecting something tender, a customary word about family or friendship. Vivian held her glass to her lips for a heartbeat, wine trembling in her hand, every muscle poised. This was the moment she had orchestrated. "To love, honesty, and truth," she began, her words cutting across the table like an arrow. The kind that always finds its way, no matter how hard someone tries to hide it. The words landed like stones in a pond. Ryan's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Mia shifted in her chair, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Vivian drew a steady breath and let the next words flow, each one measured, deliberate. "Ryan," she said, locking eyes with him, "do you think true love can survive a lie?" A hush descended, sudden and heavy, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Ryan's laugh was brittle, forced. "Of course," he said, glancing around for an escape. "Why would you ask that, Vivian?" She smiled, but it was no longer the smile of the woman who forgave so easily. "Because true love," she said, "never betrays." The last words struck like thunder. Gasps rippled through the room. Mia's face paled. The collective intake of breath felt as if the house itself were inhaling. "You think I didn't know?" Vivian's voice sharpened, controlled and precise. "While you were planning secret getaways with Mia, I was here, watching, waiting. I've seen everything. And now I'm done waiting." Mia's eyes widened in shock. She tried to rise, indignation and panic mingling across her face, but Vivian was not finished. "Sit down," she commanded, calm yet absolute. "Not yet." Ryan stammered. "Vivian, I can explain." Vivian raised her hand, cutting him off. "No explanation will erase what you did." Then, turning to the stunned guests, she continued with icy clarity, "You may be wondering why I invited you here tonight. I wanted all of you to see the kind of man Ryan really is." The room buzzed with murmurs. Ryan's face fell as shame spread across his features. Mia avoided her gaze, caught in a silent net of humiliation. What should have been a warm, trivial celebration had transformed into a battlefield, and Vivian stood at the center, an unshakable force. In the days following the dinner, chaos rippled outward from that night, but Vivian met it with an unnerving composure. The apartment she had shared with Ryan no longer held the memories of intimacy. Instead, it was a blank slate, meticulously clean, free of the shadows of betrayal. She moved through the rooms with purposeful steps, reorganizing her life as she reorganized her mind. Loneliness, which might have shattered another, became an ally, steadying her resolve. Ryan, in contrast, sank into the abyss he had created. Word of the affair spread quickly, whispered in quiet conversations, trailing him with judging glances wherever he went. His once constant phone buzz became a deafening silence. Mia, the escape he had relied on, began to withdraw, her complicity cooling into distance. "Ryan, we can't keep doing this," Mia whispered into the phone one night, her voice taut with regret. "Things have changed." Her words carried the weight of someone wishing to be anywhere else. Left with no refuge, Ryan faced a life unraveling around him, powerless to stop the consequences of his own deception. Friends and acquaintances, once silent allies to his double life, now either judged him or quietly turned away. The man who had juggled two realities was forced to confront the collapse of both. Meanwhile, Vivian became the center of unexpected admiration. Friends and family rallied not out of pity, but in recognition of her poise and strength. The community that had been rocked by scandal now made space for respect. She had not merely been wronged. She had risen above it. One sunny afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, she sat across from her closest friend Marina at a cafe tucked along a cobblestone street. The warm light danced across their table, illuminating Marina's genuine affection. "You're a rock, Viv," Marina said, taking her hand. "I've never seen anyone go through something like this and come out stronger." Vivian exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of the gesture seep into her bones. "I don't feel strong all the time," she admitted quietly. "But I've learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time." There was no bravado in her voice, only truth, hard-earned and deeply felt. She had learned to rebuild, and in that quiet resolve, she found herself anew. Days melted into weeks, slipping past like the tide along Key West shores. The Vivian who had once clung to Ryan, letting her heart dictate every step, had faded. In her place stood a woman determined to reclaim herself, one small victory at a time. She threw herself into projects and passions she had shelved long ago, rediscovering pieces of herself she had long forgotten. One weekend, she returned to an old love, photography. Picking up the camera felt like exhaling after years of holding her breath. Every frame she captured, the rusted iron balconies of a Charleston street, golden sunlight filtering through Key West palms, the quiet ripple of waves against a pier, belonged to her alone. There was no need to impress anyone, no expectation to capture beauty for someone else, just the pure, unfiltered act of seeing and being. Each click of the shutter stitched a tiny seam in the healing of her heart, every image a testament to her regained clarity. Ryan, on the other hand, was left with the echo of his own choices. The silence of her absence pressed against him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He stared at his phone for long stretches, hoping for a message from Vivian, a plea, a reconciliation, even a fragment of longing. None came. Nights stretched endlessly, sleepless hours filled with the constant replaying of what he had thrown away. He had once tried to have it all, to live two lives simultaneously. Now he had nothing. The life he had so carelessly built was hollow, echoing with the weight of his betrayals. One quiet morning, Vivian walked through a sun-dappled park near her new Charleston home. The soft, early light caught the edges of her hair, warmed her skin, and infused her lungs with a newfound freedom. The past lingered, as it always does, but its weight no longer pressed on her shoulders. She settled onto a weathered bench along a winding path lined with magnolias and oaks, the scent of damp earth and flowering jasmine mingling in the air. She pulled out her phone and scanned her messages, a work email, a note from Marina checking in, but nothing from Ryan. She smiled, a quiet, unshakable smile that spoke of peace. What she felt was not bitterness or victimhood. It was a profound sense of calm, a joy rooted in the certainty that she was no longer broken. She had been remade, stronger, clearer, wholly in command of her future. Instead of carrying the burden of a love that had failed, she carried the knowledge of her own resilience and the openness of a life she could now shape entirely for herself. Sometimes, life forces us into battles that feel unbearable, and betrayal carves deep, raw wounds. Yet it is in those crucibles, under the pressure of pain and heartbreak, that we discover the breadth of who we truly are. We can let despair consume us, or we can rise, tempered and transformed. Vivian had chosen the latter. She had risen. And as she stood from the bench, camera in hand, the sun catching the glint of determination in her eyes, she walked forward into a world of possibilities, free, unshaken, ready for the life she would now create entirely on her own terms. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.